This is the story of a single young woman named Phrae, a fourth-year university student studying at a well-known university. Phrae's home was located in the heart of Bangkok. It was a fairly large house, yet she often stayed there alone, as her parents frequently traveled to work in other provinces. Phrae's parents were fairly well off, which meant she never had to struggle in life. She lived in a beautiful, spacious home, drove her own car to university every day, and had both a housekeeper and a gardener who worked at the house full-time. Her parents took care of every expense and arrangement, allowing Phrae to live a comfortable and content life. She was satisfied with the cleanliness and order of the house, carefully maintained by the gardener and the housekeeper who came to work there regularly. However, Phrae often felt irritated, as a neighbor's dog would frequently sneak into her yard, sometimes even leaving its mess behind. It was scattered everywhere. Even though she was not the one who had to clean up after the troublesome dog, she still disliked having them wander around, leaving her house and the surrounding area dirty. The main reason Phrae disliked it so deeply was simply because she did not like dogs at all. Not just dogs, but even cats held no affection for her, and she had no intention of keeping either of them as pets. She had seen many people who adored dogs or cats, some even hugging them, kissing them, and taking devoted care of them. Sometimes, they treated their pets as if they were their own children or grandchildren. Phrae often thought those people were rather amusing for doing such things, but she never paid much attention to it. Whoever wanted to raise dogs or cats was free to do so. As far as she was concerned, she simply chose not to be involved, and she did not want dogs or cats coming anywhere near her home. Therefore, Phrae always reminded the housekeeper and the gardener that, if they ever saw dogs or cats wandering around, they were to chase them away immediately, because if Phrae were to see them herself, she might deal with the situation decisively, to the point where the animals could end up getting hurt. Was that some of her friends had brought along their own dogs and cats, seeing that Phrae almost wanted to go straight back home, but she was afraid her friends would criticize her, saying she was being too extreme, wondering how far her dislike for dogs and cats really went. So Phrae reluctantly stayed on the trip, and asked to stay alone in a small room, simply so she would not have to be around the dogs and cats. But in the end, the dogs and cats that came along on the trip still managed to bother her. A small adorable dog with fluffy fur suddenly ran into her room. That dog's name was Duck Dewey. It belonged to a friend Phrae was quite close to. The more she looked at it, the more she had to admit the dog was actually cute, and its fur was clean and well-groomed. Clearly because her friend took very good care of it. But no matter what, to Phrae, the dog was still neither lovable, nor something she wanted anywhere near her. Phrae tried to shoo it away softly, whispering shoo, shoo over and over again. But Duck Dewey only sat there, staring at her with wide, innocent eyes. Standing in front of the mirror, Phrae kept trying to chase it away until she grew tired, yet it still refused to leave. Eventually she gave up, walked over, and sat down on the bed to unpack her clothes. And then, in that very moment, Duck Dewey suddenly jumped up onto the bed. It burrowed straight into Phrae's pile of clothes. Seeing that, she was terrified to the core, and that fear quickly turned into anger. No matter how clean Duck Dewey might have looked, to her, it was still a dog, and therefore dirty. Phrae grabbed a clothes hanger. She struck Duck Dewey with all her strength. The small dog whimpered in fear and shock, yet it did not jump away, instead curling itself deeper into the pile of clothes. Phrae then grabbed its body and threw it down onto the floor of the room. Once Duck Dewey managed to steady itself, it staggered backward, staring at Phrae with sheer terror in its eyes. Seeing that it still had not left, Phrae shouted at it. She then grabbed the bottle of water she had nearby and splashed it forcefully at Duck Dewey, soaking the small dog completely. Duck Dewey immediately ran off toward its owner, who happened to be walking over at that very moment. Phrae's friends scolded her for hurting her dog, especially since another friend had witnessed everything. Seeing Phrae strike Duck Dewey with a clothes hanger and throw it down onto the floor, that friend immediately went to tell her. As soon as she heard, she rushed over, just in time to see Phrae splashing water onto Duke. The two of them argued heatedly, yet Phrae showed no concern and offered no apology. She kept repeating only one sentence. I hate dogs." From that moment on, the two of them stopped being friends, with the dog becoming the very reason their friendship ended. In reality, Phrae always tried to avoid confronting dogs and cats directly, because she did not want to do anything to them. However, nearly every neighboring house kept dogs or cats, which meant that at times, she had no way to avoid them. And sometimes, she felt both angry and irritated, as the barking and meowing echoed endlessly around her. The dogs barked non-stop, without a moment of rest. As for the cats, they kept meowing over and over again, to the point where Phrae could barely sit outside her house at all. Sometimes, she felt that dogs and cats did nothing but disturb her peace. Whenever she tried to sit there comfortably, hoping to relax and unwind, all she heard were the sounds of barking and meowing, forcing her to retreat back inside the house. Sometimes, when she drove out of her house on the way to university, the moment she opened the front gate, she would find it covered with dog and cat droppings. It became so overwhelming that she let out a scream. That day, Phrae's car tire ran straight over a pile of dog feces, leaving her furious in her anger. She went to file a police report against her neighbors for failing to take responsibility for their dogs and cats, allowing them to soil the front of other people's homes. The situation escalated to the point where the police had to step in and mediate. In front of both the neighbors and the officers, Phrae stated firmly that if she ever saw dogs or cats defecating within her property or in front of her house again, she would deal with them immediately. The police responded by telling her that it was not right, and that she should not treat dogs and cats in such a way. Phrae then said that, in that case, the owners of the dogs and cats needed to take better care of their pets. Otherwise, she would take decisive action, and no one would be able to place the blame on her afterward. The pet owners eventually agreed, and promised to be more responsible. After that, things gradually began to improve. Phrae rarely saw dogs or cats wandering around her home anymore, and she no longer heard the loud noises that had disturbed her in the past. There were no longer any dogs leaving their mess in front of the gate. Phrae began to feel better, and she often came out to sit in the garden outside her house. But then, one day, a black cat slipped into Phrae's home. That black cat appeared to be a stray. It looked thin and filthy, its fur matted with dirt. The cat slipped in through the back fence, while Phrae sat with her back turned, in a quiet corner of the garden. Phrae sat enjoying the gentle breeze, reading her favorite book in quiet contentment. Nearby, the cat began regurgitating a gecko it had eaten. What remained was little more than the head, filthy and nauseating to look at. Phrae gagged in disgust, and picked up a stone from nearby, throwing it at the cat to scare it away. But the black cat remained still, continuing to retch as if nothing had happened. Phrae was furious that the cat refused to run away. She rushed into the kitchen nearby. She grabbed a small kettle of hot water, the water having just finished boiling. When she reached the spot, she poured the hot water forcefully onto the cat. The black cat jolted violently from the pain of the scalding water, then ran off in panic, scrambling away until it disappeared from sight. Phrae shouted for the housekeeper to come and clean up what the cat had vomited, then walked back into the house, her mood dark and unsettled. Several days later, Phrae walked out to the front gate with the gardener. She wanted him to trim the trees in front of the house, as many of them had grown wide, spreading branches and were beginning to lean. After explaining how she wanted the trees to be shaped, Phrae turned and headed back inside. But she suddenly froze when she saw a neighbor's dog standing there, urinating on her tree. Phrae was furious. She reached for a wooden stick that the gardener had left nearby. She struck the dog with all her strength, swinging the wooden stick with full force. The dog let out a sharp yelp of pain and hurriedly ran away, limping on one unsteady leg. Phrae rushed after it, trying to strike it again, but the gardener stepped in and stopped her, saying that simply chasing it away would have been enough, that harming it like that would only bring bad karma. But Phrae did not listen. She flung the wooden stick aside and walked back into the house in a foul mood. The gardener could only stand there watching, confused, unable to understand how deeply Phrae despised dogs, to the point where she could not bear the sight of them at all. And if they ever came too close, they would inevitably be hurt. She staggered and collided with a steamed bread stall, At that very moment, the vendor was lifting the steaming basket used for the bread. Inside the basket, there was still hot water left from the steaming process. The vendor lost her balance, and the hot water inside the steaming basket spilled directly onto Phrae. Phrae screamed in pain, and people nearby immediately rushed in to help, taking her to the hospital right away. Phrae remained hospitalized for treatment, and her parents returned to stay closely by her side. She had suffered a broken leg and severe burns from the scalding water, her condition quite serious. Phrae had to stay in the hospital for many days. When she was finally discharged, she returned home and continued her recovery there for months. After everything that had happened, Phrae began to feel strangely different, because what had happened to her was a broken leg and severe scalding from hot water. Phrae could not help but think back to what she had done to those animals. The cat she had splashed with boiling water, causing it to writhe in agony, and the dog she had beaten with a stick, forced to drag one injured leg as it ran away. She thought they must have been in unbearable pain and suffering. Phrae began to believe that this was the consequence of what she had done to the dogs and cats, a form of karma, just as the gardener had warned her. After she had fully recovered, once her leg and the burns from the scalding water had healed, she returned to university and resumed her normal life. After that, both the gardener and the housekeeper noticed that Phrae no longer involved herself with dogs or cats at all. She might still dislike dogs and cats just as before, but she no longer had any intention of harming them, even when she saw them wandering near the front of her house or straying into her property. Phrae would simply call the housekeeper or the gardener to chase them away. Even when a dog left its mess in front of her gate, she no longer felt angry or upset. Instead, she told the gardener and the housekeeper to take more careful and frequent care of both the inside of the house and the area in front of it. And if they saw dogs or cats wandering around, they were simply to chase them away. As for Phrae herself, after the injuries she had suffered that time, she never harmed dogs or cats again.
Drawn by BikiBaam. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to hit like, subscribe, so you won't miss any of our new creative clips. Support our art journey with a super thanks. See you again in the next clip. Coming soon.